common thread throughout this event for myself, but definitely something I think that may come into use for Jean-Paul. It does help him out against things like the Venusaur and the Urshifu, and even the Torkoal to a certain extent with those big special attack damages that it's got, and it doesn't really worry too much about the wheezing and the neutralizing gas to have that berserk ability. It doesn't need it to function. It does have to be careful around something like the Regieleki, but maybe it can utilize that in a way around maybe activating a weakness policy and really taking advantage of that situation. The Incineroar, I think, is going to be very pivotal as well for Jean-Paul, because even though the Intimidate may not be coming into effect straight away because of the neutralizing gas, the fact that it gives Jean-Paul some sort of fake out support as well, a way to slow down what Davide's trying to do, and a nice offensive option against something like the Venusaur, and take advantage of the sun as well is a nice option for him to have.
I mean, low-key, I will be devastated if I don't see a Regieleki in this match, as there is one apiece. But let's dive into their achievements as well and take a closer look at what they've accomplished thus far as Pokemon Masters. You got Davide over there with the EUIC finalist title there in 2018. I remember watching that league. It was so intense. Came so close to taking that champion title. He's also got other accolades in 2018. Harrogate Regional top 8 finish. In 2017 came top 8 at the European International Championships as well. And in that same year was a finalist again. So Davide always coming so close within taking that champion title, but just hasn't been able to do it as of yet.
Yeah, and it's getting to that point. Like, let me tell you from experience, it is heartbreaking getting that far in a tournament and not being able to clinch it. So he'll be hungry for it, and he's done everything right so far in this tournament. So I'm sure he's going to be going into this, taking all those past experiences and putting them on the field in practice today. And then we look on the other side of the bracket here, and Jean-Paul Lopez has got just as many good accolades. 2020 Latin America International Championship top 8, what an achievement. And then all those 2019 achievements, top 32 at Worlds, North America International Championship top 4 as well, and then another top 8 from the 2018 Latin America International Championship. So again, both these players know what it is all about to be at this stage in tournaments, and then it's just about pushing on, and one of these players is going to do it today and get to the finals.
Exactly, they've got some amazing achievements on there already, but both of them will be really looking to add Players Cup 2 champion to their achievement roster. I mean, that's really the dream for our remaining competitors at the moment. And Lee, I don't think we should delay any longer. Let's jump into game 1 of this match and kick off our winners finals. These players have made it so far in the tournament, and they've just got a couple of games to go. It's going to be the Spectria and the Amoonguss coming out on one side. We've got the Regieleki and the Urshifu there on the field as well. So Davide really leading out with that Regieleki, delighted to see it. But Urshifu there as well. That can be a lot of trouble for that Spectria.
Yeah, and this is a smart lead from Davide, because the one thing if you've got Regigigas is the problem would be if you saw the Spectra lead from Jean-Paul, and that's probably what he expected, was that the Ghost typing kind of makes you immune to those max strikes. So putting on pressure straight away with a really good choice here from the Urshifu, and the Regieleki supporting it as well as a really good option, being able to get damage and do some big work against that Amoonguss and the supporting Pokemon here.
Yeah, Spectria, known as a really speedy Pokemon, so being able to lower the speed is really key there for Davide. Amoonguss, however, going to have to take that Wicked Blow, of course, going to be a critical hit, as Spectria is able to fire off a Mud Shot, so going to go into the Urshifu, do a little bit of damage, but again, lower the speed here. So Regieleki going to be the fastest thing on the field, and the Urshifu taking that sport as well from the Amoonguss. Urshifu not able to pick up that critical KO, and we've seen that Amoonguss from Jean-Paul do a lot of disruption with that spore.
Yeah, and again, we're seeing how well it's been trained, You think because of the initial damage from the Electro Web there, it'd be enough to put it in range, but still no, it's still standing strong on the field. And now Jean-Paul's got access to switch it out and get the Regenerator ability active to get some HP back to utilize it later. And bringing a really nice switch in here, immune to the Regieleki, and starting to put, a little bit more pressure on the board from his side of the field.
Yeah, I like this turn here by Jean-Paul. Like you said, Landorus not going to worry about it, and Urshifu is guaranteed to take that turn of sleep, so it's a really safe switch in there for the Landorus. Spectre, of course, going to be able to survive another one of those Electro Webs, even though it is at -2 speed. Doesn't have to worry about the Urshifu due to the sleep. It's able to go for a Nulla Mud Shot and just keep reducing the speed of this Urshifu going forward, while also dealing some substantial damage, really putting it in good range for this Landorus.
Yeah, and if the Landorus now, Jean-Paul might want to go for his Dynamax turn here because he's got the opportunity with the Landorus outspeeding that Urshifu to get an Airstream off. He's not affected by anything that the Regieleki's doing, especially if it's locked into that Electro Web. We don't know quite yet, but the Spectra definitely in a little bit of a bad position. So, if Jean-Paul wants to preserve that for later on, may want to switch the Amoonguss back in, soak up those Electric type attacks and get that max Airstream off. And at the same time, you're giving Amoonguss a speed boost as well, which can really benefit you if you really want to disrupt a little bit further with those spores going into the rest of this battle.
Exactly. The Amoonguss, like you said, the regenerability is going to give it a little bit extra HP to come back in later on, as Regieleki just goes straight for the Thunderbolt there into the Spectre and is able to pick up the KO. It remained untouched from those mud bombs there. So Landorus here going to be able to go for the Earthquake as well. Going to be able to pick up the KO against both of David's Pokemon here. Regieleki, never really the best Pokemon to try and take any ground type moves at the best of times. And the depleted HP from that Urshifu really putting it in prime range. And Landorus, with the Life Orb there as well, dealing that extra damage, really has come on as a formidable force on the field. But David does have another strategy he can go for in his last two remaining Pokemon. That Venusaur and Torkoal combination will really throw the speed back into David's favour. With the sun being on the field, Venusaur's going to be very, very happy about this.
Yeah, definitely. And this is a combination that you really want to take advantage of here. If you're David, the sun being upset with the Torkoal, putting a lot of pressure on to both Pokemon on Jean-Paul's side of the field, and definitely now with the Venusaur, the ability to take advantage through with its Chlorophyll ability, doubling its speed, going to get the jump now on Landorus Therian. And it does have to be careful, of course, about the max Airstream. And the big question is, has Venusaur got enough to actually take down the Landorus? The sleep powder there is so big. Pivotal miss there, unfortunately.
It had a way to stop it right in its tracks with that sleep powder, but does avoid the Landorus that also jumps out of the action with that fly up into the skies. Torkoal is going to have to take a nap with the Amoonguss outspeeding it here and being able to put it to sleep with a Spore. But crucially here, neither of these trainers have used their Dynamax as of yet, Lee.
No, not yet, and they're both being very patient with when they're wanting to do that. But I think David's kind of hand is being forced a little bit because he's only got two Pokemon left. There's only a certain amount of time that he's going to be able to utilize this. The Landorus on Jean-Paul's side going for that fly the previous turn is really playing into his advantage here, because the thing is the Venusaur now is going to attack before the Landorus and you're going to waste a turn. So does David just go for a Protect here if he's got it, or does he actually go for the Gigantamax and then try and get some damage onto maybe something like the Amoonguss here, get max Ooze off, get a special attack boost to help boost the Torkoal. So if you can get an early wake up or one turn wake up, you can get some big damage off and really maybe even clear the field from the Amoonguss that's super effectively weak to the fire type attacks and the Landorus that'll drop down from that fly.
Yeah, you're right there. The speed tier is kind of working against David here, but he's actually going to go for that max guard. Landorus going for the fly into the Venusaur would have been able to deal a good chunk of damage, but David using one of those max turns to guarantee the protection for his Venusaur. Torkoal is going to have to take the Pollen Puff there. Really not going to deal too much. Torkoal doesn't mind taking that, but the critical thing here is that Landorus is now back down into the action. Venusaur, of course, can outspeed, go for something like a G-Max Vine Lash and start getting that residual damage going onto the field and targeting down into that Landorus, but Jean-Paul does, of course, still have access to his Dynamax as well.
Yeah, that's the big thing. The Landorus can go for its Dynamax this turn if you feel, and then there's even a play where you could go for the Max Guard here, and then you're wasting almost 2 turns of that Gigantamax Venusaur. But then if you do that, you've kind of still got to get round that final turn of the G-Max Vine Lash, which is going to almost guaranteed to get off, and then you're staggering out the residual damage, which you probably don't want to do if you're Jean-Paul, and you want to just have that immediate impact as soon as possible, as well as the Torkoal. It's not going to stay asleep forever, so you want to try and get some damage onto the things on David's side of the field whilst you can, especially after that max guard the last turn.
Well, Venusaur not protecting this time, going straight for the G-Max Vine Lash into the Landorus, does a decent chunk of damage, but thanks to the doubled HP stat from the Dynamax, that Landorus is easily going to be able to take that and fire off a max Airstream in retaliation. Goes into the Venusaur, does a huge chunk of damage, taking it down to that 1 HP. Thanks to the Focus Sash on the Venusaur. A really critical item. I know you touched on that yesterday, Lee, how it was a really interesting choice on Venusaur. We don't see it as often anymore, but certainly really working out here for David. Amoonguss going to go for that Pollen Puff, however, and, the glory that happened there for that Venusaur with the Focus Sash is no more. So Jean-Paul's been able to remove it from the field. Little Torkoal here now has a really big challenge ahead of it, particularly when you're facing down against a Landorus that can just hit you with something like a Max Quake.
Yeah, it's really kind of the game is in Jean-Paul's hands now. There's not really very much David can do. And again, we've seen how well he's utilizing that Amoonguss, really disruptive from the start here, you know, taking that combination of attacks from the Regieleki and the Urshifu, shutting that down and then positioning himself really well.
Yeah, well, let's jump right into game 2 and maybe see if that Regigigas will make an appearance. Like you said, it's got a lot of versatility. Even something like a G-Max Hailstorm will be able to apply a lot of pressure to the Amoonguss and the Landorus too. But it's going to be a lead out of the Amoonguss and the Spectria on John Paul's side of the field, and Regieleki and Urshifu will be there for David. So no changes so far, Lee.
No changes at all on the field, and going for the same thing again from both players. And, you know, like what we just mentioned as well, is David thinking about going for that little bit of a more powerful attack into the Amoonguss to remove it as quick as he can? Is Jean-Paul thinking that is what possibly could happen? Could we get maybe a Landorus switch in here, or just you know, you can't protect in front of Urshifu. That's the key here. You can't protect because of that Unseen Fist ability. So you're kind of stuck here and hoping that David doesn't double in with that big attack. But as we're seeing, Lou, it's kicking off.
Yeah, Regieleki needed that little bit of extra damage, so going for the Thunderbolt is going to be able to give the edge over that Amoonguss. Mudshot going to come out once again, connect onto the Urshifu and just lower the speed, but not enough to stop it from moving first before that Amoonguss with the Wicked Blow. Of course, the guaranteed critical hit here as well is enough to pick up the KO against the Amoonguss, and David can breathe a sigh of relief as he doesn't have to worry about that pesky mushroom anymore going forward in this game 2.
Yeah, and that's a big turn there for David, you know, taking down the Amoonguss. We've seen how disruptive it can be, how much of a thorn in David's side it was in that game 1, and removing it turn 1 is just the best thing he can hope for. Now he doesn't lose his Urshifu is still intact. It is -1 speed after the Mudshot, so you've got to bear that in mind, but I mean, he can still switch it out, preserve it for later on, and still pressure that Spectre with something like, you know, the Wicked Blow if he decides to go for it. But it is under a bit of pressure from the Landorus here that can go for the Dynamax this turn and also pick up a quick knockout onto the Urshifu here with a max airstream and take a big advantage quite quickly. So momentum can swing. I think both players need to really address the threats in front of them, and Urshifu probably wants to exit the field here, whether or not David wants to bring in something like Torkoal to maybe soak up a little bit of damage if that's what he's got in the back like he had in game 1. And then does Jean-Paul maybe like pick up on that and go for maybe Max Quake, get some special defensive boosts as well? But I think the priority is always going to be the max airstream, because if that Venusaur comes back onto the field, you need to be and want to be faster than it when it does.
That's very true. You've really got to consider your stats. So Urshifu leaving the field to reset that attack and speed drop that it got in that sort of turn 1, and then with the Landorus switching, I think is going to be critical here for David. And although Torkoal might be coming in and having to take a big chunk of damage for its efforts, it has done the critical thing of setting up that sun. So when Venusaur comes in, it's going to be able to have that speed ready for its Chlorophyll ability to activate. But an interesting change of Dynamax here. It's actually going to be the Spectria for Jean-Paul. The Landorus not going to be able to go for any max airstreams on this occasion. Regieleki going for a Thunderbolt though, and you can see it does a huge chunk of damage, about a third to that Spectria, but Spectria able to retaliate with a max Quake going down into that Torkoal that switched into the field. It is, however, able to survive on 27 HP, so unless Landorus has doubled up into it, it's going to be able to hang around at the end of this turn. However, the special defense going up is going to be unfortunate when you consider the Pokemon that David has got here. Other than the Urshifu, the predominantly special attackers, so that's a calculation David has to bear in mind as he goes forwards in terms of how much damage he's going to be capable of dealing out. Rock Slide comes out though. Torkoal once again just showing its really impressive defense stat off here, able to survive on 5 HP, and Regieleki able to take that as well.
Yeah, and you kind of think if you're Jean-Paul, maybe, oh, it's a shame that I missed out on the Torkoal, but this actually plays into your hands a little bit better, because you don't really want the Urshifu return to the field and putting on any Sucker Punch pressure potentially to the Spectre here, especially when you pair that up with the Regieleki, and now with that special defense boost, like you've just mentioned, Lou, you're in a real good position to maybe pick up the knockout onto Regieleki, get another special defense boost, as well as just maybe pivot out the Landorus with something like a U-turn if he's got it here, just to pick up that knockout and help you kind of reposition for the next turn.
Well, Landorus is going to get off the field, and you'll be very happy, Lee, to see that Galarian Moltres enter the field as the Glastrier decides to go straight for a max guard here. Just wants to protect itself from anything this Regieleki can throw at it. You can see it was the Electro as well, so Spectria just wanting to keep its speed intact. Moltres, however, not so lucky, but the switch in from Jean-Paul is going to benefit, however, as the weakness policy is going to be able to activate, boosting up that special attack and attack for the Moltres. Yawn's going to come out from the Torkoal here, connecting onto the Moltres that's come in. So although it has got the boosts, John Paul's now in an awkward position where on the next turn, that Moltres will be falling asleep if he doesn't switch it out. But if you switch it out, you lose the boosts.
Yeah, it's not ideal, really. I think Jean-Paul thinking that probably another Thunderbolt going to come up, but, you know, David being a little bit smarter there, thinking maybe this is the point where a switch could come, and whatever he's got in the back, we want to try and keep the speed advantage as best as possible, and also check the Spectra's speed as well. We don't want to allow it getting, you know, taking advantage and being the fastest thing on the field, especially if the sun runs out, because you lose Torkoal at this point, then you are just relying on those raw speed stats. So this is another thing that David's kind of considering, but doing all the right things to stall out these Dynamax turns from Jean-Paul's side of the field.
Well, Jean-Paul staying in with the Moltres, knowing that it could survive another one of those Electro Webs, taking it down below 50%, activates that Berserk ability as well. Regieleki, however, will be KO'd from the Max Phantasm coming out from that opposing Spectria here, going to be lowering the defense on that Torkoal as well. But, you know, doesn't have a lot of HP left anyway. I'm sure it would go down to one little hit there. But the special attack of the Spectria rising as well. Moltres able to go for that Fiery Wrath connecting onto Torkoal and just blows it away right back into the Pokeball.
Yeah, and with that, it clears the field on David's side of the field, but unfortunately, that is the last turn for the Dynamax on Jean-Paul's side. So the Spectre will revert now, and because of those Electro Webs, it's very vulnerable now to an Urshifu coming in and doing some big damage, as well as that Moltres that, you know, has taken those drops as well. The Urshifu going to be able to potentially, if we see a Gigantamax here, could double up into the Moltres. It's so low health as well. There's probably no need to, but I think, like, you know, Jean-Paul in a position now where he has to make a decision. Does he just leave what he's got on the field? It makes sense to leave the Moltres because of the Yawn, the sleep status there. Just allow that to go down. He's got some return on it, getting the knockout onto the Torkoal. But do you want to preserve your Spectre for later on in this game? Because, as I've mentioned before, when the sun does disappear, and if the Urshifu doesn't lock into Sucker Punch, then you've still got a way to utilize it maybe later on in this game, but at the cost of maybe sacrificing Landorus at the same time. Is it worth it? It's a very difficult situation, and David's put himself in a great board position here.
Let's jump into game 3 and see whether David is maybe going to shake things up dramatically, try and throw Jean-Paul Lopez off his game, or if he's going to stick to the same strategy. There is going to be a change, however, from Jean-Paul. Amoonguss is still here, like you said, that pivotal cog in his team, but this time paired up with the Incineroar, allowing that Intimidate to go straight away onto that Urshifu and apply a little bit of fake-out pressure onto the field. David, however, sticking with the Regieleki and Urshifu combination as his lead.
Yeah, the inclusion now of Incineroar is really nice, not only for the Intimidate support onto the Urshifu, but like you say, Lou, the fake-out support that it provides Amoonguss, it allows it the room to actually function like it did in that game 1. It doesn't have to worry about a potential double up here, and it does make David, you know, react to that. So he's going to have to either take something going to sleep or switch out to kind of absorb maybe a potential Spore coming in.
Well, the Regieleki is going to have to take the fake out from the Incineroar. The Wicked Blow from the Urshifu once again targeting down into that Amoonguss, but as there can be no double up thanks to the fake out, Urshifu will have to go back to sleep as it did in game 1. But this time Urshifu hasn't taken any damage at the moment.
No damage at the moment, and but it is sleep, it is out of action, so it's not really going to be able to do as much as what David wants. And now you've got an option. You've got the option here. If you're David, there's not really too much of an offensive threat in front of you. You know, the Incineroar and the Amoonguss aren't going to damage you too heavily. So do you take a few turns to try and get the wake up, and then maybe utilize the Regieleki in the meantime? But you know, the Regieleki here is in an awkward position where it can get spoiled this next turn. So like we're saying, maybe Venusaur come onto the field here to soak that potential Spore up.
Yeah, and it gives Jean-Paul the nice option to potentially switch in the Landorus. But no, Amoonguss just going to go for the Protect this time. Doesn't want to retreat and set his Regenerator ability up. Just going to stay on the field for a little bit. Incineroar, however, going to be the Pokemon leaving the field and going for that parting shot into the Venusaur that's joined the field and going to be lowering its special attack by 1 stage. So the damage coming out from David's Venusaur will be limited going forward. But again, from Jean-Paul's side, it's still the opportunity to potentially bring in that Landorus. You can apply another Intimidate to the Urshifu, rendering it really useless here on the field. And then once again, apply the pressure of something like a Max Airstream into that Venusaur, but instead going to be bringing out the Spectria to the forefront.
Yeah, interesting. I wonder if John Paul has actually brought the Landorus to this game, maybe sacrificing that and bringing the Incineroar instead, wanting to go down more of a Spectre route. And I think now, if you are John Paul, you've got a couple of options where you can potentially switch the Amoonguss out, reactivate that regenerate ability, and get the Fake Out back onto the field. But it's risky because you're relying on the Urshifu staying asleep if you do that. Whereas if you keep the Amoonguss out on the field, then you know that you've got that redirection support for the Spectre, and you could maybe go for the Dynamax and go for some big damage and try and remove the Urshifu as quick as you can.
Well, the Amoonguss is going to leave and use its regenerator ability to get a little bit of HP before we see it again. Spectria, however, utilizing its speed that it's got, you know, still intact this time, going for that nasty plot. We've seen nasty plot on so many Pokemon throughout this tournament, but on Spectria, I think that's a first for me there, Lee. Venusaur going to go for the Leaf Spawn, however, going to target down into the Spectria, do just over about a third of damage, and now reduce its special attack even further. I think it's going to be now at -3. The Urshifu, of course, we saw was still sleeping there as well. Slightly unfortunate there for Davide. You know, some big damage, particularly with one of those critical hits, will really do a lot of damage into that Spectria.
Yeah, definitely. And the Venusaur really nice. The Mania's 3 now, you know, that special attack, so it is going to have to switch out. But the inclusion, getting the Incineroar onto the field for Jean Paul is really nice to like attack into that Urshifu now. Because the thing is, you've got the Fake Out support. Even if it does wake up, you've got a way of kind of stopping it. So that is a really nice option. And then with the nasty pop boost now, that Spectre is going to be hitting incredibly hard. So you can probably pick up a knockout with that combination Fake Out and then a max move into the Urshifu. So that is something that, you know, Davide's going to have to be aware of as well if he wants to keep this Urshifu for later on. And as we're seeing, he is switching it out.
Yeah, I like the way Jean-Paul has kind of countered around that Urshifu, you know, knowing that the sleep turns were ticking away. It had the opportunity to start waking up, so making sure that Fake Out was in the field to be able to protect the Spectria there was a really nice adjustment for him. But speaking of adjustments, Davide is really shaking things up on the field. We see Torkoal join and set up that Sunshine as Regieleki joins, and Torkoal going to take that Fake Out that was intended for the Urshifu. Spectria not Dynamaxing, however, goes for the Mud Shot into the Torkoal. At +2, it is not enough to be able to pick up the KO, but will reduce the speed of Torkoal. But we all know Torkoal doesn't mind that too much. It's a nice and slow Pokemon at the best of times, and regains a little bit of HP with its Citrus Berry. So a lot of board adjustments here for Davide.
Yeah, and Davide making the correct one. You know, he's got his Pokemon in pretty safely, especially the Regieleki, which is the Pokemon he probably wants on the field now to make use of that Electric Web that we've seen him use so well and successfully in previous games here. Going to be able to slow down that Spectre, which is such a big thing, you know, and even if it goes down, then you've got the option to bring the Venusaur in, and you're still going to have access to your Gigantamax Venusaur if that is the route that you want to go down. Obviously, the Torkoal has shown why it's such a good Pokemon, taking that big, nasty plot boosted attack there from the Spectria, and not really caring about the speed drop either. Such a slow Pokemon, but very strange play here from John Paul, forced out with the Spectria and bringing in the Amoonguss.
Yeah, just removes the Spectria from play here. Doesn't want to take any potential speed drop. And another way to reduce the speed is by going for those Thunder Waves. And then you also get the additional chance of paralyzing your opponent. Amoonguss is going to have to take that as Snarl comes out from the Incineroar. So going to be lowering the special attack on both of these special attacking Pokemon. So Jean-Paul really trying to negate the offensive pressure that Davide has access to. But Torkoal not going to be going for any physical attack here. Going for another one of those Yawns into the Incineroar. Going to potentially force it to switch out. But being an Incineroar, it's known for kind of switching in and out of a battle so it can reset that Intimidate and Fake Out. And we know it has Parting Shot as well, Lee.
Yeah, so it's got the option now to pivot out and maybe allow John Paul to get something back onto the field. It's going to be a little bit more useful because of that sleep. You don't want your Incineroar going to sleep just yet. You need to keep active that Fake Out for later on in this game. The problem is now for the Amoonguss that with that paralysis that we've seen from the Thunder Wave is it's actually going to underspeed the Torkoal, so it's not going to be able to hit it before it can take a big fire type attack. But not seeing that. Just a very defensive play and a really good positioning play from Davide here.
Yeah, well, the Regieleki going for the Protect. Davide calling that was going to be the target of the Parting Shot. So Incineroar will be forced to stay in on the field and go to sleep at the end of this turn. Davide, however, did manage to capitalize on that additionally by switching out the Torkoal for that Urshifu. So it's going to come back onto the field, have the potential to wake up and fire off a big damaging attack.
Yeah, this is a really great play from Davide now because he's in a position where he's got time to allow the Urshifu to sit on the field until it wakes up, and that's ideally what he wants. You know, he wants the Urshifu to wake up as soon as possible. The Amoonguss can't utilize Spore as well if we see a switch to the Venusaur, and that allows Davide, again, the Venusaur on the field in the sun in a great position and not threatened currently by that Incineroar that is sleeping on the other side of the field.
Well, Jean-Paul manages to switch it out and bring that Spectria back into the fray, placing down against that Urshifu that is still going to be sleeping. So Spectria getting quite lucky and avoiding any of these dark type attacks. Venusaur, however, coming in to take that Spore and of course won't be affected due to being a grass type Pokemon. So definitely a lot of switches coming up from Davide here, but I wonder when the Dynamax is going to come into play here, Lee.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because as we've just seen on Davide's screen, the sun will be running out this next turn, but the Urshifu is bound to wake up sooner or later, either the next turn or the turn after that. I've lost count of the sleep turns here, but it is very close. It's been very tired, staying asleep, so, you know, it's not got long to wake up, and it's not really in a threatened position at the minute. It's quite happy to stay on the field, and if the Venusaur decides to go for the Gigantamax here, it's a great opportunity to start getting some damage on the board, and you've got to be a little bit wary about the Spectre as well, but I don't feel like it's the time maybe that we're going to see that.
Well, it is going to be the Dynamax here for Davide. Going to be that Venusaur jumping up into the action and being able to go for some of those G-Max Vine Lashes as well. So Davide's kind of bided his time here to a position where he can start dealing out some really big offensive pressure. And the lovely thing is he's got that Torkoal on the back, so even when the sun runs out, Davide just has the opportunity to be able to switch it in and reset that up to help Venusaur out a little bit more. Going to be going for the Max Quake though, boosting up the special defense on Davide's side of the field, going straight into that Incineroar. Not going to be enough to pick up the KO against it, but does a sizable chunk of damage. And I think being able to get the boost up here is going to help when facing down against that Spectria, particularly if it wants to try and go for a nasty plot boost. But instead, going straight for that Mud Shot into the Urshifu that takes its first bit of damage in this game 3, having its speed reduced as well. But it does finally manage to wake up. The Mud sort of shook it into action, and it goes for that wicked blow. Finally able to find its target and go into that Spectria and just remove it from the battle.
Yeah, I mean, a really nice play here for Davide and covering kind of a switch in from the Amoonguss, suspecting maybe, you know, the Pokemon that you've seen so far, the one Pokemon that could come back in is that Incineroar, and you know, just covering bases as well as kind of making sure that you've got special defense boosting. Here's that Spectre. It does go for the max, the Dynamax here, because you know it hits so hard. So it's definitely a Pokemon you want to like kind of cover with those big special attacks. So really nice play all around. We do see the Moltres come back onto the field finally for Jean-Paul, which gives them a good option to hit the Venusaur for good damage here.
Yeah, really interesting to see that, as you said, Lee, he did not bring that Landorus. It's going to be the Moltres as his fourth and final Pokemon. So interesting though that Jean-Paul doesn't have the utility to go for those max airstreams. Potentially the Venusaur can feel a little bit safer here in terms of its position. You know, it's at its full HP at the moment, but we saw how much that airstream did previously. But we know that Moltres can carry something like the Nasty Claw, and if it gets boosted up and Davide doesn't have a way to shut it down, then it can start dealing huge damage through Davide's team. But no Nasty Plot boost here. Jean-Paul just wants to get into the Dynamax action as well, and Dynamax is up that Galarian Moltres. And going for, you know, a lot of the sort of dark type moves it can deal out, it can start reducing the special defense, potentially rolling through with more max moves and dealing even more damage. But first of all, the Max Quake's going to go into Incineroar, and we know that's going to be able to pick up the KO. And Davide really now playing around in the face of this Moltres, getting those special defense boosts up just to prepare itself to take a max move in return.
Yeah, they're going to be so pivotal against the Moltres. You know, the one thing that it is good at is dishing out special attack damage, and these special defensive boosts are going to be really, really important, especially for the Venusaur, you know. The Urshifu going down, which is a little bit unfortunate, but because of that speed drop that it took from the Mud Shot off the Spectra, I don't think it's a bad thing, though. It opens the door for you now, if you are Davide, to get the Torkoal back on the field and make sure the sun's up to support your Venusaur to really kind of maybe get a last attack off before Venusaur finishes its Gigantamax turns. And you've also got the option here to go for another Max Quake if you want.
Well, this is where things start to get really interesting. If it goes for one more Max Quake, then it won't be able to set up the G-Max Vine Lash at all and get that residual damage going down onto the Moltres. But with Amoonguss rejoining the field, Jean-Paul has the opportunity to go for something like a Rage Powder and redirect anything that Torkoal might be sending out. Venusaur still, however, can apply so much pressure to this Moltres by setting up that residual damage. But Moltres on the other side, going for those Max Airstreams, that's something Venusaur doesn't want to face. I believe it still has access to its Focus Sash, though, so that could put it into a really strong position here. Torkoal, however, just going for the protect here. It's going to be another Max Quake, however, coming out from that Venusaur, just going to target straight down into that Amoonguss. Does a decent chunk of damage, but again, I think the critical thing here is getting those special defense boosts up in the face of this Moltres. I think this Venusaur is now at that +3 thanks to the 3 Max Quakes that it has taken. Moltres going to go for that Max Airstream. Remember, it's not going to be boosted, and whoa, you can see the benefit of having that special defense boost there. Venusaur is delighted to take it. It could take another 1, another 2, maybe even 3.
Definitely maybe 3, I think. Yeah, really taking that very comfortably after those special defense boosts. Maybe not going to be the same kind of pitcher going into this next turn, but the thing is, the Venusaur we have seen on Davide, he does have access to that sleep powder, which can really, you know, on the other hand, you know, we've seen how that Amoonguss really disrupted Davide's side of the field. Now the Venusaur, coins flipped, has got the option to really disrupt Jean-Paul's side, and especially disrupting in the middle of a turn where your Pokemon is Dynamax is really detrimental to kind of getting any sort of grip on a match here. So if that hits, it's going to be really difficult for him to come back from.
Well, Venusaur goes straight for the sleep powder into that Moltres, you know, boosted up by the sun. The Moltres hasn't been able to outspeed yet thanks to these Max Airstreams, who just picks up the sleep on Moltres. Torkoal going to follow up with the Yawn, but of course it's going to fail here on this occasion as Amoonguss goes for the Spore. So lots of sleep being thrown around, but I do like the way that Davide did cover that, just in case the sleep powder was going to miss onto that Moltres. Having the 100% accurate Spore, the Yawn on there following up was just going to allow it to go to sleep on the following turn. Either way, Davide wanted to see it take a nap.
Yeah, and it's a nice way to just, like you say, just cover that just in case, because Sleep Powder isn't the most accurate move. We've already seen it miss in this set already, so, you know, just making sure if it does, then you're kind of covering bases with the Torkoal there. But not coming into play. The Moltres now finishes up its Dynamax turns and going to be in a bit of an awkward position, because the Amoonguss just doesn't have the damage output to hit the Venusaur, and the Venusaur pretty free to just dish out the damage, and Moltres, if it is relying on something like Hurricane, going to find it a lot more difficult in the sun than it would in normal situations.
Yeah, Amoonguss definitely not going to be able to deal any damage, but keeps getting paralyzed as well, as we saw in that turn. So really not able to do anything remotely offensive to Davide's Pokemon here. And it really does look like Davide's in the driving seat here. He's got the control over the Amoonguss and that Moltres as well, keeping it to sleep. And we know the Regieleki in the back as well, with those powerful electric type attacks, will be able to deal really big damage to the Moltres. Davide just has to make sure that he gets it in a position where Regieleki could be able to take that single KO, and it doesn't have to worry about taking a move from Moltres.
Yeah, and I think if you are Davide, I think the one thing that you might want to like concentrate down on, I know the biggest threat on the field is the Moltres, but if you can remove the Amoonguss from the field, then at least you got Regieleki to come in as well and kind of help support this, because with those speed boosts, when the sun runs out, Moltres is going to be hitting pretty hard, and as you can see, it has just woke up and been able to get those boosting moves in action.
Yeah, getting the nasty plot off there as well makes Moltres really formidable, and Amoonguss breaking through the paralysis this time and helping out its buddy, going for that Pollen Puff to help Moltres regain some HP. So Amoonguss showing that it really is the most disruptive Pokemon here at the moment, and Torkoal staying asleep there for Davide. Obviously not going to be able to deal any of those fire type moves that could potentially remove that Amoonguss from play. You want to make sure as well, if you're Davide, you're making the most of the sun, not only for the Venusaur, but to boost up fire type moves for that Torkoal as well, so it can deal as much damage as possible.
Yeah, and the Torkoal really, you know, it is asleep. It took the opportunity to double up onto the Moltres just in case the Sleep Powder did miss there, but that was an opportunity, I feel, where you could have maybe got a fire type attack off into the Amoonguss to get some damage onto it, but unfortunately that wasn't what happened. But, you know, Davide being smart here, making sure if the sun does, you know, disappear, he's switching in the option he's got in the back in the Regieleki, so he's got the sun to bring in again to make sure that that pressure is continually on and he's not losing an advantage here, because the Moltres, unfortunately, if it is outspeeding the Venusaur, is going to be able to potentially pick up a knockout with those nasty pop boosts, even after the special defense boost that it has got. So being able to switch in the Torkoal, you're kind of relying on maybe a Sleep Powder hitting here, but if it connects again, it makes the battle a lot easier. But the Amoonguss, like you've mentioned, Lou, is the kind of the glue to this, because with those Pollen Puffs, as long as it's on the field and with access to Spore, it can just put the supporting Pokemon for Venusaur to sleep and really stop them kind of functioning. So that's something I think that Davide's going to have to concentrate down on at some point.
Yeah, and this is really sensible and considerate play here from Davide. You know, he switched out the Torkoal knowing that the sun was going to end at that turn. Now Venusaur's got the sun activated again. It is the fastest thing on the field, going for that sleep powder. Does, of course, connect onto the Moltres and is putting it to sleep once again. So just making sure that he's fully aware of the ball position and putting it in the way that he wants. Amoonguss still going to try and help out Moltres, regaining itself, I believe now going up to full HP. But while it is sleeping, there's very little that it can do in terms of its defensive pressure. We know that it is nasty plot boosted as well, so Davide really does have to make sure that he can remove it from play. It might be a case, though, as you mentioned, Lee, trying to remove that Amoonguss and utilize those turns while Moltres is sleeping so that you can stop it for going for those pollen puffs and regaining that HP before you target down the Moltres. But there's always the risk that it could wake up.
That is the risk, but I think this is maybe a golden opportunity here where you can potentially double into the Amoonguss and remove it from the field and hope that the Moltres does stay asleep, because what you're doing at the minute with the Moltres is you're getting damage onto it, but as long as the Amoonguss sticks around on the field, it's just kind of overwriting that damage with those pollen puffs, as we've seen, so it makes it very difficult to really get the damage onto it and kind of get rid of it like you're wanting to do, and you're in this like never-ending cycle of having to get the Torkoal out for the Regieleki and to get the sun back on the field at certain points.
Well, we've seen a lot of sleep turns in this game 3, but Moltres is having none of it. Manages to wake up and go for that Fiery Wrath. Picks up the KO against Torkoal, so once the sun does go down on this set of Sunshine, it's not going to be able to be set up anymore by Davide, and he's forced to bring in his last Pokemon here, the Regieleki. So Venusaur looking like it's got a little bit of health depleted here. Needs to make sure that it's, you know, playing protectively, making sure that it's making the most of the turns that it's got left, because those Fiery Wraths are going to be dealing a lot of damage. Regieleki, however, could be the answer, targeting down into that Moltres. Amoonguss potentially, though, could redirect away a powerful Thunderbolt. So Regieleki just going to be protecting itself here for Davide, wanting to make sure that the key Pokemon is not going to be KO'd, allowing Venusaur the opportunity to put that Moltres right back to sleep, so Regieleki can have a happier time bouncing around on the battlefield, ready to fire off some electric type attacks.
Yeah, so that sleep powder here really pivotal, and getting the Regieleki in, protecting it as well, just sets up this next turn where you can potentially go for a Sludge Bomb from the Venusaur and then that Electro Web, and just hope that it is enough, because then, you know, the Venusaur's immune to the redirection from the Amoonguss because of its grass typing, and also the Electro Web is a double target attack, so it's not going to worry about being drawn in through a Rage Powder. But as we see, very unfortunate, the Amoonguss is fully paralyzed.
Yeah, not going to be able to Rage Powder away any electric type attacks. It's going to have to take the Sludge Bomb from the Venusaur, and you saw it actually did a huge chunk of damage to that Amoonguss. Regieleki, however, able to capitalize and go into that Moltres and remove it from the field. You know, Davide didn't want to double up into that Amoonguss and remove it, decided to utilize the opportunity, and even if the Rage Powder had managed to redirect, it would have been able to, I think, pick up the KO against that Amoonguss with the dwindled HP it had remaining, and then as long as Moltres stayed asleep, Regieleki could target it onto the next turn. But, I mean, really great play there by Davide, making sure that Regieleki was protected. You know, I'm always going to be a fan of anyone protecting Regieleki when it's on the battlefield.